Hello everyone, my name is Yudhir Jaswal. I'm the group editor at Ymedia. Very warm welcome on Ymedia. It's a very special day today. Mississauga is going to elect its new mayor very soon. Why I'm saying new mayor? We all know Bonnie Crombie. She was the mayor, but she is now the Ontario Liberal Party leader. And it's election night here at Ymedia. We will be covering you all the details. We'll take you through the background, how this race became very interesting. Because in the longest time, we all know, yes, there was a time when Hazel McCallan, she definitely dominated the scene. There was not much of a contention at that time. Then came Bonnie. Of course, she was the front runner in the elections as well last time in 2022. But now here we are, very interesting race. But to discuss all this, we have two very special guests here. We have Quito Maggie. He's the founder of Main Street Research. Quito, a very warm welcome on Ymedia. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. It's nice to be here in person finally.
Yes, you're here first time in person. We've spoken a lot on air, but a very warm welcome once again.
Thank you.
And Robert, also from Main Street. Robert, a very warm welcome. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. And at this point, Quito, why don't I start with you? What do you think how this race has panned out, the Mississauga mayor election race?
Yeah, very interesting. I said over the weekend, you know, that for a very long time, basically since Bonnie became leader, it was assumed that that Carolyn Parrish would become the next mayor. And early polls, that first poll that we did back in January, she had a 3-to-1 lead over the next closest competitor. And you know, knowing that it was in June, we thought, okay, is there enough time for someone to catch her? But then the polls that we did in February and March didn't really seem to close too much of a gap. It was only until very recently that things got interesting. That June 4th poll that we did had 3 candidates all tied within the margin of error, basically a 4-way race. And then our most recent poll just from the weekend, just to get that final, to see where the momentum was going, people have gone back to Carolyn Parrish. So I expect to see Carolyn Parrish win. I don't think she's going to win by as much as what we thought. But it's been a long, and then really just the last month has been very intense, and seeing a lot of changes in public opinion.
Yeah, so you're already predicting a winner because you're the pollster, the phologist. So I'm sure, let's see, you're saying that yes, Caroline could win, maybe not that the margin that we initially thought. Robert, how did you say, I mean, of course, Kudo explained it very well, but how did you see this race?
Yeah, usually with a lot of these mayoral races, as Quito explained, there is a leader, a person who seems to be the major leader up front, right? Obviously, going back to the last mayoral by-election we had, Toronto, Olivia Chow was the front runner for a while, but even in Toronto, you saw that Anna Blau came very close there at the end, and there's an argument that if that election lasted a couple more weeks, a week or so, the result could have changed, right? So it's kind of interesting how, like, generally when you have these front runners, it's like, okay, well, that person should go on to win, but as we saw in Toronto, that was not what happened, right? It was actually a relatively close race near at the end. This time, it's been a little more challenging for, say, another person to kind of rise up, right? I mean, obviously, Parrish has led the entire time, but it's mostly, I mean, okay, 29% in our final poll, that's a lead, far from a dominant lead, right? I mean, okay, 29%, a third, you're like basically a quarter to a third of the percentage of the vote, still a 4-way race, basically, right? No one candidate is like completely, like, there's a couple of candidates, obviously, the lower percentages, but a lot of candidates are very competitive in this race. And the thing is, to make a competitive race where you have, like in Toronto, when you had Chow versus Bilal there at the end, you have to have other candidates fall to have one gain. And of the other 3 candidates, Deepika, Alvin, and even Dasco, none of them have really fallen. They've all just kind of been jostling neck and neck for second, kind of third place. And because none of them has been able to differentiate themselves and kind of burst out of that chase pack, you haven't really seen much competition there for Parrish at the top spot.
Yeah, good point. And Why do you think this happened, at the start, as you just mentioned, Kudo, that yes, Caroline was definitely leading, and even after a couple of months, we didn't see much of a competition, but then here we are, we started seeing more and more competition, the race grew close. Why did this happen?
Well, honestly, I think at first, we had someone else very high, and some of the other polls also had someone else very high. And I don't think a lot of people even realized that there was an election for those first couple of months, even though Bonnie Crombie stepped down in early January. People knew that she'd been elected the leader of the Ontario Liberals in December. That it didn't click in yet for people that there was a by-election. So I think that a lot of that someone else in those early polls, that was just people saying, well, what do you mean? Bonnie's our mayor. And so as the awareness and recognition started kicking in, that's when we started seeing the undecided rate falling, someone else was shrinking, and all of the other candidates were as they were making their pitches to the voters on policy, that's when those undecided started deciding for those voters. The people who were already voting for Caroline Parrish because they knew who she was, she's been around for a very long time, the most experienced, the longest serving on council of the mayoral candidates, that was already decided. Everybody else started relatively gaining on her. But it's been very interesting to see that it's been very narrow. Not one person emerged as the sole head-to-head competitor against her. So that's why I expect her to win tonight.
All right. And Robert, let's talk a little bit about the issues as well. I worked all my life here in Mississauga, as much as I've lived in Brampton. But I want to understand, in your viewpoint, what do you think the issues that resonated with the community?
Yeah, and I think, when we do a lot of polling, obviously we do national and provincial and obviously municipal polling, and the issue that just keeps coming up again and again is housing. And obviously it's such a huge burden, not just on younger voters who struggle to find affordable housing, but also on older voters who sometimes are renting or want to find another place, move up on the housing ladder. And it's always housing, and the other issue there is kind of affordability, right? Now, municipal government, on some level, it's not the biggest concern on municipal levels because, again, obviously municipalities don't set a lot of the things that influence prices at, say, the grocery store, but they do impact affordability. Obviously, you have property taxes, usually assessed twice a year. That is a large chunk of money that comes out of a family's budget, and those things add up. So when people talk about affordability, at least on the municipal election, they're looking for someone to say, okay, I'm not going to put extra burden on families in Mississauga. They're going to say, I want to keep those property taxes lower. But also at the same point, a lot of people, specifically younger voters, they're coming out and they're saying, who's going to build the house that I'm going to live in? Who's going to build that house that I'm going to purchase and start my own family in? And the thing, when you look at turnout in municipal elections, usually turnout is quite low. We're kind of expecting lower turnout tonight. But at the same time, the people who usually don't vote, those people tend to be younger. So the people who are older and typically are more affected by things like property taxes, those are the people who are going to show up today to vote. But typically younger voters who are more in tune and care more about housing, they're less likely to show up. So it's this delicate balance where, although yes, technically housing definitely crowds out affordability in terms of the issue people most care about, that's skewed a little bit more towards that affordability and that property tax issue when we look at basically who's coming out to vote today.
Good. Kuto, your take on all the issues. What do you think?
Yeah, to elaborate on what Robert is saying, I think affordability and housing, and that's why I thought that the Alvin Ted show, if you look at Alvin's path from February to now, in that first poll, we had him at 8%, 5% all voters, 8% decided and leaning, and he's more than quadrupled that support 3 times if you look at the decided and leaning. And I really think that his focus on that affordability, that pledge to freeze property taxes for 2 years I thought was very smart. Probably the smartest announcement I saw from any of the candidates during this election, because it speaks to those two main issues, housing and affordability at the same time. People, while interest rates are still high, pledging for 2 years to maintain property taxes at their current level, not freezing them for a longer period of time, which might seem irresponsible, but just for 2 years. To me, I thought that was the smartest policy announcement. I think that's why he's made so much gains. If you look at his number, a lot of his support comes from younger voters, probably families that can afford more property tax increase. So that, you know, and I think if Alvin has a chance to win today, it's going to be because young voters come out in big numbers for him. I don't think it's likely, but I think that he definitely has a path because of that.
Okay, Robert, another important point that I want to ask you. I know we've had debates, and Carolyn, at one point, she moved out of the debates. Do you think there was a challenge? Because I saw a lot of media discussing that, though she's still the front runner, and Quito was already saying that yes, and I think so. Yeah, she's hold on to her the front runner position at least. Now we'll know what happens. But do you think that that hurt her or no? How is that?
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly. Usually when you're the front runner in a debate, not a lot to be lost by not attending the debates, right? Obviously, if you're coming in there with a lead, everybody's going to be attacking you, saying, oh, your policy on this is bad, or your policy on this is bad. That's generally how all debates go. You see this in any sort of mayoral race, any sort of election. The front runner always gets attacked. So by saying, okay, I'm just going to not do that, I'm just going to walk away, I'm just going to not have any attacks, you do help yourself, because then you're not subject to those attacks. There's no bad clip of you saying something that you might regret later. So some positives. The negatives, though, is that then at that point, then a lot of the people, the voters, are saying, well, why aren't you at this debate? The thing is, as we polled this race, I mean, she's never really broken out of 30, the low 30s. So there's, and even then, as we've been polling this race, there's been a lot of undecided voters. You're basically banking on those undecided voters to say, well, you know what, she's good enough, I'll support her. And you're banking on the fact that a lot of them aren't saying like, hey, I still want to know more about these candidates. You're banking on the fact that they have all the information that they think they need, and then they're going to make a decision off of that. And I think, well, I mean, our last poll does have her winning, not by a commanding margin, not as you mentioned, the Hazel McCallion or the Bonnie Crombie margins, but still a win nonetheless, right? So, I mean, it's now just up to the hour. We'll see how it goes out soon, but it was a gamble, and we'll know in the next, we'll know soon, but probably about half hour, so we'll know if it was a good gamble or not.
Just for viewers' benefit, I'd like to tell you approximately 2 minutes left before the close of the polls. And here at Ymedia, we'll be showing you the numbers pretty shortly. Who takes an early lead, we do not know, but we'll take you right till the end. We also have our reporters there lined up at different positions, where Caroline Panish, Deepika Damrela, Stephen Dasco, Alvin Tedjo, where all of them right now, Brian Crombie. So we'll be taking you live there as well as we take you through this election night coverage. But polls closing in almost 2 minutes, so after 8 p.m. the polls close, and then we'll start getting the numbers right here on Ymedia Channel Y. So we'll take a very short break here, but please don't go away. In the next 2 minutes, we would be back after a very, very short break in the next 2 minutes. And before we go on to this break, I'd like to once again tell you that once we come back from the break, not only we'll be discussing polling, but I have a very interesting question to ask from Kuto and Robert. I'll take their advantage. That yes, we recently covered the elections in India as well, but yes, many of the pollsters there, they got it wrong. Not wrong actually, they picked the trend, but they're quite off as far as the number of seats were concerned. So we'll try to understand how much of this is a challenge. How does Main Street maintain its accuracy? And Main Street, we like to tell you, it's not only here in Canada, but they're in US as well. Of course, they would be planning to expand, so we'll understand the polling methodology as well. and from Quito and Robert. We have two very good experts here. We'll discuss that. But over here, we're going to take a very, very short break. After this short break, please don't go away, because we'll start having the numbers, and we're going to carry you live all this number after a very short break. Stay tuned with Ymedia. Thank you.
Hi, this is Priyanka Chopra and you're watching